Hello. I'm preaching today and prepared something. I hope it speaks to you, and I hope God uses me to speaks through me to help you guys out. I have some questions to start out with, and the first one is: did you ever not do something you were supposed to because of what someone might think? Anybody? No one? Okay. Okay, second one. Have you said something when you should have have you not said something when you should have because it wasn't popular? Third one is, when you thought those things, were you thinking whether it would please God or not? And so today I'll be talking about don't please people, please God. And I want to cover people pleasing first. And people pleasing is a preoccupation, a focus, a distraction, or an obsession with acceptance. So you could be worried with being accepted by certain people or certain groups. You could also, the second one is approval. If you're looking for someone else's approval, that's also a people-pleasing focus. Popularity. Did you want people to think you are cool? Maybe you want people to, think you're cool. Personal comparisons. Do you compare yourself to others and what they do and what you have and what they have and you don't have? Self-image. Are you concerned about how you look or how you are perceived? And pleasing others. Is your first thought, what can I do to please them? And so I want to discuss some indicators of people-pleasing. And I know some indicators. I have an indicator in my car that keeps me under the speed limit, or it sets me at a speed limit, and it tells me when I go over it. And then sometimes I just got to choose whether I'm staying under or below it. But it tells me when I pass a certain speed. And so we need to look at indicators to see if we have fallen into people-pleasing. One of the indicators that maybe you have seen have seen, you have fear or questions on how other people will think about you. So that could be maybe me. What are people thinking about me tonight as I'm speaking? I don't know. I'm scared. But, and then the second one, your goals and dreams tend to center around impressing other people. So I can maybe recall a story like maybe in grade school or whenever, when younger kids kind of like compare who has the biggest house, who has the most money, why their shoes are the best, or why they cost more. That's one example. And then you have the indicator of you are a respecter of persons. And it really talks about you might think of someone that's better than you, or maybe someone who's higher or more impressive of a higher class. But why do you admire them and why? Or who do you admire and why? And then the third one is past hurts or disappointments, keeping you from growing relationships, career, or your interests. And the fifth one, you aren't obedient because of fear or failure or humiliation. Not giving your all because maybe you didn't want to be viewed in a certain way, or scared of what could happen if you fail or get humiliated. So if you see these in your life, don't be discouraged, because become a God pleaser. So I want to talk a little bit about faith and the fear, because if you're worried about fear or humiliation, we talked about it with Pastor Marie, but she talked about it, how fear is the devil's faith. And obviously faith is of God. And I also heard this in the book called Hung by the Tongue. It's by Francis P. Martin. But he talks about how fear is the devil's faith. And if you're feeding on that, then you're in the devil's faith. And so it also talks about in Proverbs about the fear of people being in a trap, and that it literally traps you and keeps you in a box. So in Proverbs 29:25, it says, fearing people is a dangerous trap, but trusting the Lord means safety. And so I also want to bring up Daniel, because he had a pretty crazy story about maybe fear and just trusting the Lord. And obviously he was captive from a different nation. He was in Babylon, and he was one of the governors in Babylon under King Darius. And he was actually pretty close to King Darius, and actually was probably going to be one of his top guys. But there was three governors in particular, which was Daniel and two others. And the other two others wanted to get rid of Daniel because they knew he worshiped the Lord and didn't really like that. So they convinced the king to make a law that exclusively only allowed to worship King Darius for 30 days. And so these men in Daniel 6, 5 through 9, it says, "These men said, 'We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God.' So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, 'King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree, that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree." And that was Daniel 6, 5 through 9 again. But once again, Daniel didn't, he obviously heard the law, but he decided to continue to worship him because he's a worshiper of the Lord. And so it says in Daniel 6:10, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days." And so the 2 other governors and other probably people around the area who were overseeing the area found him and thought they succeeded, so they went and told the king. And since the king has to honor his law, he had to throw Daniel in the lion's den. And so the other governors thought they succeeded, and although King Darius threw him in the den, he wanted him to live because he was still great friends with them, but it was just he had to honor the law. And so he fasted and prayed the night when Daniel went into the lion's den, prayed for God to deliver him, and then woke up the next morning and went to the den and asked Daniel if he was still there and if God delivered him. And then it says in Daniel 6:23, "Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God." And so obviously he trusted God with what he did. It also says earlier in that passage that he prayed to the Lord for deliverance, and the Lord shut the mouths of the lions. And so Daniel was more focused on God than anything else. And he wanted to please God even if it meant death. Which begs the question, if Daniel was willing to please God in the face of death, how much more should we be pleasing him in our daily lives and moments? And this is another great verse that connects with basically the decision that Daniel made in his lifestyle. But it says in Colossians 1:10, "That you may walk, live, and conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him and desiring to please him in all things." And this word, please, in Greek means a desire to please. So after reading that verse, it bears the question again, do I desire to please God on an everyday basis? Does that question fill every area of your life or only some? Examples are like maybe I try to please God only when I'm at church, maybe only when he's moving in my life at church when I feel great and I know that he's answering my prayers. Or are we supposed to please him in all things at all times when we feel like he's not moving or our prayers aren't being answered? Or are we struggling, going through hardships? This can also be trusting God. We just need to please God in everything we do, even when it's not going good and also when it is going good, all the time. And so I want to reiterate that we are not supposed to live for other people. We are supposed to be living for God. And so there's also another example that we see in Galatians. We see Peter. He was with the Gentiles, and he would spend time with them all the time and do different things. But then when the Jews came, because the Gentiles were considered unclean back then, he would hide away, or not hide, but he would act like he didn't know who the Gentiles were when the Jews came around, because he acted like he didn't know them because he wanted to please a certain group. And so this is 3 points, or maybe 4, that I want to harp on before we get into our final point. And it says, if you're living true to God's word and following his path and will that he has for your life, then no one else's opinion matters. God should be your only source of approval. You should not seek approval of others who are not walking in the will of God or walking like Christ. Therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to him, which is 2 Corinthians 5:9. I'll read it one more time. Therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to him. And so in this verse also it says pleasing means fully pleasing and fully acceptable. And maybe you ask, we need to please God, but how do we know what is pleasing in his eyes and what we can do to please God? And one thing I would say is, does it line up with Scripture? And you need to go to the Word and see what God says. And so in Philippians 4:8, this is just one example you could say is pleasing in God's eyes. But it says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Philippians 4:8. And so in closing, a few things I think would be good to think about is, do you recognize your need for him? Are you living to please God or others? Are you running with the right people, or are those people putting you in the right direction, or are people taking you to places you don't need to go? Are you standing up and being the leader that makes a difference for the right things, or one that leads people the wrong way? And so, once again, I just think it's an important topic to talk about pleasing God and obviously not pleasing people, and that it can get into a tricky situation when you start pleasing people and not God, because God's the only opinion that matters, and his approval is the only one that matters. But that's all for my message. Now I want to move into a time of worship, and I just want to invite the presence of the Lord. And I just hope that this speaks to people, and God uses me to bring his presence into this room right now. And I just pray that this is a great experience for everyone, and that God is here right now.